everybody, thanks for coming. I hope you've all had a good conference so far. I see a few people that I know in the audience. And Lee said, oh, we're having this conference. He said, would you do something? He said, would you do a keynote? And I said, well, what do you want? He said, oh, something about how, MMU 6th students, what about the new strategy? And I said, okay. And when I thought about it over a while, I realised that what Lee was really asking me was, well, as head of research, how do you see the way research is going at MMU and in the country at large? How's that going to affect a whole generation of PhD researchers? So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to take you through quite a few issues. Someone could borrow it. Yeah, if I just give you a signal. Right, so the first thing I'd like to talk about is how the new research and knowledge exchange strategy for MMU is going to affect your PhD. Hopefully in a positive... Oh, does it work? This can always be disastrous for me, but I'll do my best. So that's the first thing. But then one of the things that Paul and I have been talking about as well is this idea of the impactful PhD. So when we get to the issue of how research has impact, I'll be talking about how that might relate to PhDs and why that might be important for all of you sitting here. I think doing a PhD in 2013 is a million miles away from when I did my PhD. I think there are very different pressures on you as a generation of new PhDs. And I'd just like to talk a little bit about what the issues might be. And finally, because I think it's important and it's interesting, do you want to talk to you about your digital profile? The fact that we now live in a digital age. And from my point of view, and probably everybody else's point of view, what do you do if you want to find out about someone? You search. You go to Google and you search, don't you? So, whether you like it or not, most of us have a sort of digital footprint. So I just want to talk to you a little bit about how you might use your digital presence in a very positive way to sort of market yourself in the future. So that's roughly what we're going to cover. And this is exciting. Let's see whether I can advance this without any... Yes. Okay, now you probably know this already, but I thought I'd mention that, it's very significant that we're all here in this room together, because this has been organised by the graduate school and it's been organised by the students. And we do now at MMU at long last, I think, have a focus on postgraduate students and the postgraduate student voice. So I'm hopeful that you are seeing some of that support coming through. We have a good, active research community on Facebook and other places. And so, one of the things we are definitely trying to do is make sure that we support you better than we have in the past. I'm hoping that that is working for you. This is brand new. This is kind of hot off the presses. It was approved by the governors in June. It's going to be announced to other people in the university. We start talking about it in November mainly, but we have spoken about it before. What we're doing really is testing a completely new path for research and knowledge exchange. And you see I'm using two terms there, research and knowledge exchange. In a moment I'm going to explain what I mean by knowledge exchange. It's also significant that our office is now called Research and Knowledge Exchange, and I'll explain why later. And it's a very big shift because what we're trying to do now is look at the role of research in the university, support and develop new staff, and establish some kind of benchmark metrics. So finally, we're saying, hang on, where are we in the sector now? But we know where our league table position is for teaching, or is it for research? Now, one thing you guys may or may not realise is characterised as a post-92 teaching university, but you all know as well as I do that there are some amazing researchers in MMU, and there's real pockets of fantastic research everywhere you go. And it's been my privilege as head of research to really find those researchers and talk to them. So as a result, the Times Higher Education ranking for our university, I think, is around about 75, whereas the Guardian ranking, which is based on teaching resources, is lower. So you can see that this ambition to be top 50 of universities for research is no bad thing, and it's actually achievable, but it will need more resources. So, well, it's a bit fuzzy. This is our nice glossy brochure. I guess reason I wanted to show that to you was just the principles. Research and knowledge exchange sustains the academic well-being of the university. So it's this idea that research is no longer a peripheral thing that some of the staff do. We're trying to move it sort of centre stage. And indeed, the VC just recently unveiled his vision. And I'll tell you the strapline because it's quite amusing. It's 50-50 by 2020. And what he's saying is that he would like to see us in the top 50 for both teaching and research. Now, this is a quantum leap MMU to say, to have research and teaching mentioned in the same breath is quite astounding. When I came here 4 years ago, I breezed into the business school and said, "Oh, hello, I'm Cathy, I'm here to help you with your research." Only to have my colleagues roll their eyes at me and say, "Well, Cathy, I'm teaching 15 hours a week, just go away and stop bothering me." You know, because it is hard for colleagues of mine that are still teaching a lot. So we have some people in the university who want to teach and don't want to research. So it's about bringing cultures together, and it's about the fact that research should be central to the well-being of the whole university. This is the second really important principle, and I'm going to go back to this. This idea that research benefits society through knowledge exchange. By knowledge exchange, I just mean exchanging knowledge or money or grants or something between the university and external agencies, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. And it's this idea, which shouldn't be a bad idea, it should be a really, really good idea, that the research that we do has some kind of impact and some kind of contribution to the outside world. So we'll come back to this point because it's an important one. Now, this is an interdisciplinary conference, and it's our third point on the strategy, that supporting interdisciplinary research is crucial if contemporary social challenges are to be addressed. Yes? Because I'll give you an example. We just put in a large bid for LEADCUM on the subject of sustainable living. We could not have done that without researchers from science and engineering, researchers from art and design, researchers from health, and researchers from business. So if you think about health and wellbeing, you can't address the big issues in society that research councils are asking us to look at if we just stay trapped in our own little disciplines. Now that has particular implications for PhDs, and I'll come back to that. But certainly from an institutional perspective, there is an ambition to break out of silos. We do think that research and knowledge exchange should inform teaching, and this is also perhaps going to start to affect you guys. Research and knowledge exchange is a vital part of the university's income stream. As a university, we do not bid for funds at the same rate as other universities. That's what our benchmarking has shown us. So we do need to be thinking about that. That said, in our office now we have a wonderful team who are dedicated to supporting academics bid. It's becoming a lot easier, there's a lot more bids going in. But at the same time, as we know, there are government cutbacks, there's less money to compete for. But we do need to be bidding. Okay, so what's changed? What's changed if I from 4 years that I've been here? We're now putting research at the centre of MMU. Now the government has an impact agenda that is going to affect how we do research in the future. And we're saying that research and knowledge exchange, which is that stage of your research where you actually engage your findings with the outside world and make them meaningful to someone in the outside world and benefit hopefully someone in the outside world, are equally important, and they're interrelated, they're a continuum. Income of all kinds is going to be important. So you've got to think about how this might affect your supervisors. Could be good for you guys because it may be that you're going to get included in a lot more bidding activity. Building impact will be important as evidencing impact. And as I've said, this need for us all to kind of break out of our disciplinary silos. Okay, so what about you? What does this mean to you? Well, first of all, I think increasingly, because the environment in the UK, the research research environment in the UK is going towards impact. So as you know, we've just had a research assessment exercise called the REF. And one of the things that we've all had to do, all universities have produced case studies showing how our research impacts in the outside world. And certainly I know Paul's working on sort of studentships that have to be impactful. They have to relate to the outside world and often have to have some match funding from external organisations. So as soon as you do that, and I might be using a certain person as an example later on, if some of your PhD is being funded by an organisation, what you're researching might change, it might shift slightly. So there's some interesting issues around that that maybe we'll have time to unpack. Research methods are changing. The whole environment's changing. Look at how many of you, if I just take a survey, I say, a lot of you will be using online sources in your PhD. Or you certainly probably be administering surveys online. The digital world is upon us, but with those new research methods come questions about the best way to analyse data, ethics, and a whole raft of other questions. If that wasn't exciting enough, another change that you're dealing with as researchers is open access. All universities are moving towards open access. And what that means is where you publish is more problematic, and how you get cited is also perhaps easier. Because if you have an output that's available online, free for everyone to look at, then your citations are going to go up and your visibility is going to go up. So there's some very interesting developments around open access. But one of the big issues I think for any PhD student now is funding issues. So many of our students now are sort of part funded. There's not always, the amount of scholarships have gone down in general. And so there's a need, I think, for PhD students themselves to think about how they might do almost like a sort of portfolio type model of funding, where perhaps they fund part of it, perhaps an organisation funds another part of it, perhaps the university funds another part of it. So it's about trying to think about, this is something we'll be talking to Paul about, what other models might there be to fund PhDs in the future? And, again, it's a brave new world perhaps that we shouldn't be frightened of, in that as soon as you're asking someone for funding for your research, then they need to know how they're going to benefit from that, and you're going to have an interesting conversation. So I don't think these are conversations we should be scared of. I think this is the new environment and we have to embrace it. Okay. So what we're really saying here is research and knowledge exchange are interlinked, and knowledge exchange is a pathway to impact. And I love this quote that Dave Raper supplied, who's our director of RKE. There are two kinds of research: applied and not yet applied. So I think there's a lot of truth in that. And I know when I was doing my own PhD, I was thinking, oh my goodness, I've spent 6 years of my life working on this part-time. How do I ensure that more than 5 people know about the work I've done? What about the systems analysts I've been researching? What about the implications for practice? How can I get that back into practice? So there's some very real issues about how we disseminate our findings back into the world beyond university. So, why does this matter? Well, you see, the thing is, your supervisors, your head of research, your head of graduate school, we're all responding to this. We're responding to HEFGE, which is the Higher Education Authority, Research Councils UK, Universities UK, are all accepting, and the Department of Business and Innovation Skills are all saying that what you want is you want a culture where departments, research departments, engage with business, the public sector and civil society, and are committed to carrying out new ideas through to beneficial outcomes. So again, you could argue that what's happened is that people are saying, well, universities are publicly funded institutions. If they're publicly funded institutions, well, really, the public needs to get some benefit from this research. Now, you can regard that as the most Thatcherite statement in the universe, or you can take the attitude that some of my colleagues in humanities are taking, which is this is the chance to engage more widely, and all universities, in my view, should be engaging with the outside world. That's what we should be doing. We should be critiquing the outside world. We should be exchanging with the outside world. We shouldn't be ivory towers, because the whole point about universities is we are a powerhouse of intellectual debate and critique. So why is that critique not getting out of the university? There's a new website that some of you will be familiar with called The Conversation. If you haven't seen it before, have a look at it. And what's happening there is journalists are working with academics to push out good research stories that the public can engage with. And it's modelled on a similar website in Australia. Australia's often ahead of the game, I think. They're ahead of the game on impact. And basically they are also, it's been very, very useful for academics to get their ideas out into the public domain. And as I said, what's going to happen is that all academics, especially all of you, those of you that want an academic career, are going to be partially judged, not only by your outputs, but by the impact that those particular outputs make. So, what do we mean by knowledge exchange? And it's about time I gave you a definition. So, it's the application of university expertise to the benefit of the university, its partners, the UK economy and society. So, and we can demonstrate through economic and social impact. So note that the impact doesn't have to be that someone's paid you to do this research. It could be that you created an amazing artwork, people engaged with it, you collected some data about that engagement, for instance. It doesn't have to be, definitely, funding. It can be all sorts of impact. So, just thought I'd put this up. These are sort of various stakeholders in research. You start to realise when you look at this how many stakeholders there are in any research. Schools, the media, quangos, businesses, social enterprises, voluntary organisations. There's a whole world of stakeholders out there. I had a very amusing discussion on the train coming in a few weeks ago. I found I was sitting next to two PhD students. There was one sitting next to me, and she was at the University of Manchester, and she was experimenting on mice about renal failure. So we had a long discussion about the ethics of animal experimentation. It wasn't her fault, she'd started to talk to a vegan, but never mind. So we had a long conversation, and then we started talking to the woman opposite her. And she said, and we were talking, I was saying to the woman sitting next to me, but your research has got real impact. And the woman opposite me said, oh, well, I'm a PhD student, but I'm in classics. I don't feel I've got any impact at all. And then she told me, and I said, oh, what are you doing today? She said, oh, I'm going to a school to talk to school children about why the classics are important. So in a sense, she'd answered her own question, that there she was saying, oh, classics don't matter. But she was actually engaging with sort of 11-year-olds, talking to them about why classics was important. So the point being, the range of impact, I think, is infinite, really, with an infinite range of stakeholders. Okay, and you probably can't see this. I mean, I'll make this available later for people, but this is just a handy rubric which kind of attempts to talk about the types of impact you might have. Impacts on policy, impacts on education, economic, commercial impact. There's all up there in various domains. So you've got cultural impact, health and welfare impact, environmental impact, public policy impact. There's a whole range of areas of impact. Okay. So, moving on then, we've discussed how the new policy for research should result in better support for staff and hopefully better support for students. We've discussed how the world out there and the way government is doing research means that we have to move towards impact. We've acknowledged that you're probably all quite poor and the funding models are an issue. And we've also acknowledged that this is a new world in terms of how the digital impacts on students. So the first thing is a lot of us are using social media for research. A lot of us are using social media to help us do that research. I mean, there'll be a lot of people here using Mendeley, there'll be people who use ResearchGate, people who use Academia Edu. I mean, a lot of, I hope you've all used the library Power Search. It's absolutely wonderful, where you can just type in anything into the box and it gives you what you want. Instead of me having to tell a PhD student, oh, well, you need to go to this database or that database, I just put in the title of my paper about the Mister-Grander theory and I had it within seconds. So that is a new innovation. And there's lots of innovations like that. In a sense, you're an incredibly privileged generation compared to myself and Paul, where we had to sort of go and hide in dusty library stacks for hours.
I'm only 24.
You're only 24, darling, yes, I know. Yeah, we're roughly the same generation. She's so much younger than me. But, so in a way, you're incredibly privileged because your searching is much easier than mine ever was. But with that comes some sort of responsibility. Yes? With great power becomes responsibility. You can search for anything. You can find anything. So sort of an interesting thing for all of you is, how on earth do you know it's any good? I have been a senior editor for a top journal. I'm quite good at figuring out what is good and what isn't. All disciplines have impact factors. All journals have impact factors. All disciplines have journal rankings. So you can have some very interesting conversations perhaps with your supervisor. I know I do with my students when they say, Cathy, I found this amazing paper in the Journal of Meat Production about the use of social media, and I'll say, okay, let's have a look at it, and I'll realise in fact it really is just not very good. And if I try and find it in a journal ranking, I can't. And this is the very challenge for you, is that when we're moving towards open access journals, sometimes absolutely anything can get published. And there was I think it was a science academic just recently did this sort of wonderful joke on a whole bunch of open access journals where he sent a completely, basically flawed paper to a whole bunch of open access journals. And to their shame, the majority of these open access journals printed it, or published it. So we do have to be careful about issues of quality. So in a sense, maybe your challenge is knowing what quality is in a world where you have a plethora of inputs. So we are moving towards open access. What that means is anything funded by research councils, and indeed we think any university outputs, in fact, we've already had confirmation that for our next research assessment exercise, all our outputs have to be made open access. So that means it's a good thing. It's a good thing. We are going to be able to make we'll make all our outputs available on the institutional repository. It's called eSpace. Fantastic, very good. But we have very, very high status journals, many in America, that really do not want to make things open access. What they want is them to pay for access. So we've got a situation where, in some cases, you would have to pay that publisher to make that open access in order to comply with the requirements of the grant that you just received. Now that is going to cost us. So I don't want to go deeply into the issues of open access because they're still changing and evolving and people are still discussing it. But what you might be able to see very clearly is that the publishing model is changing, yes? And open access generally is a good thing because citations will go up, yes? People can find your work, they're going to cite it. At the same time, there is a journal quality issue. Now, different disciplines handle this completely differently. So if you look at, for instance, I think it's archive in physics, you'll find that people share their work and kind of quote it the next day. Very, very different model of scientific sharing to some other disciplines. So it's changing and there's a lot going on. So I sometimes feel I became head of research at precisely the wrong time rather than the right time, but never mind. So that's what, we've got to make data available. So we've established then, you're in this digital world. So So I could do a search on any one of you. Now the first point, I'm kind of interested in your response to this. I want to know whether this is a generational issue. I have a lot of colleagues who are aware that they have a digital footprint. So what they say is, well, Cathy, I've got my professional Facebook account and I've got my private Facebook account. Now, the point that was made to me is, in fact, one believes into the other. It's almost impossible with, you know, sort of Facebook graph search and so on and so forth to actually really keep these profiles separate. And also, I think there's a generation coming through that would rather be represented as the kind of whole person rather than the professional persona and then the personal one. And I think that has been a generational change. But so I personally now accept that personal and professional profile is the same thing, and so it's about controlling who sees what. So I'm hoping that I'm talking to a whole bunch of people here that have a digital profile and manage it actively. Should we have a show of hands? How many people kind of know roughly what their digital profile is? They know what they would get if they Googled themselves. That's pretty good. That's just getting on towards half. That's good. What we need to think about here is the difference between a digital footprint and a digital shadow. The digital footprint is the one that you create. The digital shadow is the one that other people create for you. So, for instance, if you presented at this conference and, you know, Lee's put up the programme somewhere and you've got your slides there, you'll come up, but you're not controlling that. So the answer, the suggested answer for all of us, is to make sure that we get the results coming through Google and other search engines that we want to come through first. So the answer is to kind of create your own content, control your own presence, rather than letting other people sort of create this digital shadow. I mean, occasionally I Google myself and I find that I've still got, you know, websites from like 10 years ago, just kind of cluttering up the place from a conference that I was presenting at, those kind of issues. So you do want to be able to control that profile. So, why would you? Now this is a wonderful paper and I'll give you the URL for this. If you control your digital profile, these are the benefits, and I think it's so important. A colleague of mine in humanities said to me that he'd been interviewing some people for, I think it was a post of lecture on English, something like that. He said, Cathy said, they've all got websites. They're all media savvy, you know, and he was amazed at how much information about all these candidates was available online, that these were very able, new young academics who were actively managing their digital profile and making sure that they engaged. So, what might be the argument? You do need to know what your digital shadow looks like. You can make some informed decisions and, you know, how you want to be seen. You know, for people who are sort of becoming famous, as it were, or people who are like MPs, pay people to clean up their digital profile. You know, so, I don't know, I'm sure no one in this room needs their digital profile cleaned up in any sense, but you know what I mean, they pay people to manage their digital profile. So what else would you do? It's about gaining recognition in your field and beyond. I think the beyond's really important. I think it's much more now about moving out of your discipline. If we accept that impact is about the outside world, the old model of academic success no longer applies in the same way. I work with a number of colleagues in my field who are incredibly good, but they're only known to just a very small number of people in that particular discipline. Increasingly, those colleagues are going to be judged on their impact in the outside world, and a lot of them don't. They just have this kind of outside, this sort of ivory tower mentality. And I think this is important. Communicate your research and grow your networks. And given that you're going to be, if you do decide to stay in academia, or even if you don't decide to stay in academia, you're just trying to get a job. You know, being visible, having your digital profile managed, so when a prospective employer looks at your profile, it has to be worth doing, doesn't it? It has to be. And the point is that you control it. And I think this is really important for me, for you, for everyone. Increasing the visibility of your scholarly, increase the impact of your work, increase citations, and make your work available. So we've got the shades of open access there as well. And this particular report actually points out that it's on the LSE blog. A woman was saying that when she experimented with this, she experimented with making one of her articles available and blogged about it, and immediately noticed an 11-fold increase in citations. So that's quite astounding. And I know that myself. I noticed citations for a chapter I'd written were going up exponentially. And I found out it was because a colleague had made it available for download as part of a course he was running. So, you know, it's about thinking about how we can maximise that. So, it's not very good. It doesn't come out as well. So, do you have an online presence? This is also in the same report. Yes, do you know what it's made up of? Have you Googled yourself? Checked your online profiles up to date? Fantastic. Monitor and maintain your online presence. That's where I think we should all be. But this is a very, very nice, you know, and this question, is my research making an impact? Can it be found online? Okay, these are the references to that last part about the digital. This is really great. This really helps you to make the most of social media and the impact of your research, this LSE blog. And this is fabulous, and this is also freely available. So I guess now I could just ask for some questions. I have no idea what the time is.